Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, one that comes up a lot on this channel, but I don't know, for me personally, it always feels like it's relevant to talk about because it is such a big struggle for all of us, and that is self-doubt, and particularly self-doubt as it relates to the creative journey and living an artistic life, making art, all of that. So this was inspired by one of you, by a question that was emailed to me, and I've gone ahead and edited the question quite a bit actually for brevity, and also just to make sure that I didn't share anything too personal from the question asker. So we'll call the question asker Jay. And Jay asks, what do you do to deal with doubt and low self-confidence? While I've been drawing all of my life, I'm having trouble believing in my own value. I absolutely love drawing, but I'm pretty inexperienced in business, so I think that may have something to do with why I doubt myself. Any tips on how to combat these feelings? So I'll start off by saying, Jay, we all feel this way. I feel this way, not just in the past. I currently still feel this way and struggle with these feelings. And I'm guessing if you watch this channel and you make art, or you're trying to make art yourself, you also struggle with this. I think that I don't think I have ever met a creative person who doesn't deal with these feelings on a regular basis. And it's not just something that like is a once in a while. It's not just something that's once in a while. It's, almost a constant struggle. So you are definitely not alone, and you probably already know that. I hope you know that, but just in case it needs to be said, or in case it needs to be said for somebody else watching this video who struggles with that, you are not alone. That's a really common feeling. And that may give you a clue to where I'm going next, or what I'm going to say next. But unfortunately, it also means that I don't have a super easy answer for you. I wish that I had some amazing technique for just like turning off that part of your brain and not feeling self-doubt, just, completely silencing it and making it go away. But sadly, in my own experience, or, maybe frustratingly, that's a better term, frustratingly, in my own experience, what I have found is that combating self-doubt and making it so that self-doubt doesn't get in the way of achieving my goals or stop me from going where I want to go is never about stopping the feelings of self-doubt and making it so that I don't feel self-doubt. I have come to realize that I will always feel it. I have always felt it. I could say just like throughout my creative journey, but the honest answer is I've really struggled with it probably my entire life. And so I recognize that it's always going to be with me. And if you are like I was a number of years ago, if you are waiting until you don't feel self-doubt, or until you feel perfectly confident, or until you have, the really concrete plan, the master plan that's going to, answer all the questions and make you feel like you really know what you're doing or where you're going. If you're waiting for that to happen before you start pursuing your creative career or working towards your creative goals, then I don't say this to be harsh, but the reality is you probably will never have a creative career because those feelings are never really going to go away. So what we're going to talk about in this video is how not how to feel confident or how to not have self-doubt, because I just personally don't believe that that's possible. What we're going to talk about today is a very concrete 4-step process that I use to continue working toward my goals even when I'm feeling self-doubt. And I actually use a version of this process for kind of confronting or working through and integrating lots of different uncomfortable feelings, not just self-doubt. So, if self-doubt isn't your particular struggle, somehow magically, as an artist, if you don't struggle with self-doubt, there probably are other emotions and feelings that you do struggle with because you're a human, and this really can apply to those as well. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in with step 1. And step 1 is to explore your self-doubt. So self-doubt is a term that's thrown around a ton in the artistic, creative online community. I feel like it's almost as present as something like, art block or imposter syndrome. It's just kind of a term that gets used quite a bit in the community that we're all a part of. So I find that it's helpful to try to dig in and explore it, to understand what the particular circumstances, the particular ingredients, what is in your own little batch of self-doubt, because it is, of course, universal, as we've just talked about, or near universal at least. Everybody feels it, everybody struggles with it, but it can also be very particular and very situation specific. So I think this step of exploring and interrogating the self-doubt and figuring out what's going on there is really critical to being able to understand what to do next. So 3 questions that you can ask yourself, and I go ahead and just like take out a piece of paper and maybe do some journaling with this. Question 1 is, how does the self-doubt make you feel? So I've kind of alluded to this already, but it's a bit of a non-specific term. So you can say I really struggle with self-doubt, but what does that, like when you are in a place where you're struggling with self-doubt, how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel sad? Does it make you feel scared? Does it make you feel anxious, angry, afraid of missing out? Whatever it is, sit down and like brainstorm the feelings behind the feeling. Like what comes up for you when you are really in the grip of self-doubt. And then the next question to ask is, where does it come from and maybe why? So for Jay, what I would ask, Jay kind of highlighted in their question that the wondering about like whether maybe the root of the self-doubt was about business acumen and knowledge in business versus their ability to draw and how much they love drawing. So I would kind of try to push on that a little bit and figure out, is it more about the business side, or is it about art making, or maybe it's some combination of both, and try to be as specific as possible here. Some more general questions that you can ask yourself when you're in this question, when you're trying to figure out where your self-doubt comes from and why. Is there some specific skill that you need to acquire, something that you feel like you need to do and you don't quite know how to do it yet? Or is it like maybe a bit of an experience gap? You're feeling like you don't have quite as much experience as somebody else who you would compare yourself to, a contemporary, you would compare yourself to one of your peers. Or is it really something else entirely? Is it, more related to kind of past experiences and past feelings? Sometimes the practice of making art and the questions and the things that we have to work through around it are really vulnerable, and they force us to practice vulnerability. And that can bring up some really deep feelings, especially feelings that are, potentially connected to your past or your childhood. So just be aware as you get into this that it may be something that, makes you feel a little bit worse initially. But again, keep writing this stuff down, asking those why questions until you feel like you have a fairly concrete idea of where that's coming from, or the source of your self-doubt. And it could be several different things. Just keep that in mind as well. And the last question number 3 in this section is, what do those feelings make you do? In other words, what problem does the self-doubt cause besides just the uncomfortable feeling of self-doubt itself? So is it actually stopping you from working towards your goals? Is it stopping you from making art? Is it stopping you from sharing it online? Is it stopping you from reaching out to clients or contacting clients? Is it stopping you from trying new things? Try to identify, why this is actually a problem. Like, where is this actually getting in the way for you? So again, write this all down either on a piece of scrap paper or in your journal, somewhere that it's actually out of your head and onto something that you can look at kind of from more of an outside perspective, instead of feeling like it's all just packed in there and you're trying to deal with it all internally. And then go ahead and set that aside for now. So for some of you, after completing step 1, after completing the explore and interrogate phase, you may come to the conclusion that your self-doubt is being caused by what is essentially a fixable problem. Something like, I just don't know what to charge for my illustration. I don't know what a fair rate to charge for a commission is. So for some of you, after you complete the explore and interrogate phase, you may come to the conclusion that your self-doubt, the root of your self-doubt, the thing that's causing you to feel this uncertainty, this uncomfortable uncertainty, is actually, a fairly straightforward, fixable problem. Something like, I don't know what a fair rate for illustration. I don't know what to charge, what a fair rate for illustration is. I don't know how to price my commissions, something like that. Or, maybe I don't know how to remove the white background from my illustrations. I don't know if anybody still has that problem anymore, but that was a huge problem for me when I was first getting started and I felt really uncertain about it. And if that's the case, if you've identified that your self-doubt is really stemming from this fixable problem, we'll talk about how to deal with that in steps 3 and 4. If what you've learned in the explore phase is that your self-doubt feels like it's stemming from a seemingly unfixable problem, something like you maybe feel guilty for charging a fair rate for your illustration, or if you try to ask for what an illustration is worth, or what some of these external resources have told you an illustration is worth, you feel guilty, you don't feel worth that price. If it's bringing up more of the emotional side as opposed to the concrete, fixable knowledge-based problem side, then unfortunately, spending more time on Google, if you already have that information about what a fair rate for illustration is and you are still feeling those feelings, then it's about more than just a knowledge gap. There's actually something going on at an emotional level there. And of course, it can be super helpful to have knowledge when you're confronting your uncomfortable emotions, especially if you're, trying to interrogate maybe beliefs that aren't true or assumptions that aren't true, that you aren't worthwhile or that art is not worthwhile. It can be so helpful to have those concrete price lists. The ones I mention all the time on here are the Graphic Artists Guild Handbook for Pricing and Ethical Guidelines, or lightbox.info, or Jessica Hish's Dark Art of Pricing. I think those are probably my 3 favorite pricing resources. But if what you are struggling with is really deeper than that, you can have all the knowledge in the world and you're still going to feel that way. And this is very obvious. You probably know this already, but of course, you can feel a certain way, know that it makes no sense to feel that way, and still feel that way. And we all have, that happens to everybody. So this is not going to be a problem that most of us can think our way out of. Of course, there are those situations where self-doubt is really rooted at something very concrete and fixable, but for most of us, it's about something more. It's about something deeper and more emotional at its core. All right, so we are going to go ahead and move on to step 2. Step 2 is acceptance. Now we can sum up this step. We can sum up step 2 by saying essentially, this is how you feel right now. And this is really going to be the quickest step, but in my mind, it's also the hardest because it can be very easy to get stuck here. What ended up happening for me over and over again when I was first getting started in art, and really just throughout my early 20s, was that I would feel that uncomfortable feeling, whatever it was, whether it was self-doubt or something else, and I would end up being like, okay, yeah, there it is, and I would maybe even kind of figure out why I felt that way, but I would stop at that point. I would kind of just try to push it away, and I would resist and I would resist, and I would think to myself, like, I know how I feel that way, but why isn't that stopping me from feeling that way? And I would just get stuck in this pattern of, feeling the feeling, noticing it, and maybe even figuring out a little bit about what was behind it, but then resisting, fighting the feeling and trying desperately not to feel that way. And of course, I want to acknowledge that, acceptance, whether we're talking about it in the frame of this process or just acceptance in general, acceptance of any uncomfortable reality in general, that is one of the hardest things to do in the human experience. So many of us, myself included, end up, rather than, accepting the feelings after we walk through that first process of, exploring, figuring out what's behind it, rather than accepting, we then get into a stance where we're resisting and fighting the bad feelings and trying to push them away, trying to force them down, either, somewhere really deep where we're not going to notice, or trying to push them, outside of us. And yeah, we end up either doing that, or maybe even wallowing in the feelings, or again, if you're like me, some combination of both. Like I used to go through this basically the step 1 of the process over and over again, where I'd see that I felt a certain way and I would explore it and maybe even figure out some of the causes of it. But then rather than accepting that I felt that way, I would first feel really bad for myself. I'd feel sad. I'd dive into a big pool of melancholy, which was totally my jam at the time. Listen to some sad music, lay on the floor, cry, do all of that, and then try to push it away, try desperately to not feel that way, try to not feel the discomfort, in the hopes that once I didn't feel that way, I would be more able to act. But as frustrating as that cycle was, what I learned, and what I'm sure you know well as well, is that you really can't control your feelings. And well, maybe some people disagree with that, but I think they're not completely in your control, and maybe even in some forms they're not in your control at all. Your feelings are going to come up, and denying that they're there, denying that you feel them, is not going to help anybody. And of course, you can do things like positive self-talk or making gratitude journals. We're going to talk some about those later and why I think they have limited usefulness. But if they help you, that's great. But if you're like me and they didn't necessarily, help you keep moving towards your goals, you may need a different approach. And for me, the thing that was the most game-changing was moving my focus once I was in step 2, even though I didn't really realize I was in step 2 at the time. Once I was in step 2, moving my focus away from trying to change the way that I felt and on to trying to identify what my goal was, what was important to me, what my values were in life, what I wanted to do next. So moving my focus of attention away from, don't feel this way, don't feel this way, don't feel this way, this thing that I really can't do anything about and somehow just keeps getting worse and worse no matter how much I focus directly on it, and onto something that I can do something about, something that I can control, and that is my actions. So step 2 is essentially just trying to make that little tiny mental shift. And in step 3 and 4, we're going to talk about deciding on those values, identifying the things that are important to you, and then articulating the action that you want to take out of that, which is what we'll talk about in step 4. So moving right on to step 3. All right, so step 3 is to decide where you're going, decide on what is important to you, what your values are, where you ultimately want to get in your creative journey or your practice as an artist. This doesn't necessarily have to be, for somebody who's aiming to do art professionally or commercially. This could just be somebody who has this as a daily practice in their life, something that they're working on and they want to improve at. Just identify what your values are. So what's important to you, where are you hoping to go with that? So this is kind of like deciding on a goal. And because of that, there's no right answer or one size fits all answer. This is something you're going to have to identify for yourself. And I think, again, it's really helpful to do that, work through that process in some kind of written form in a journal so that you can get things out of your head before your inner critic snaps them up. But it is important to clarify, though, that even though I'm using the word goal, I mean something very specific by that. A goal, I think, I've talked about this in different videos before. I've mentioned this, I think, in my non-toxic productivity series. So I'll link to that if you're interested in diving more deeply into the process of goal setting. But what I mean when I say goal is something that is super concrete, super specific, and 100% within your control. So I think a lot of the time, artists and maybe people in general can get goals and aspirations kind of confused. So an aspiration, in my mind, in my view, an aspiration might be something like get a book deal, where, yes, there certainly are things that you can do to make that more likely, steps that you can take in that direction, but it's not 100% in your control. There are a lot of other things that would have to come into play, a lot of other factors, a lot of other things that would have to happen in order to make that aspiration a reality. Whereas a goal could be something that's kind of embedded within that aspiration that will take you kind of in the same direction as an aspiration, but a goal is 100% within yourself, within your own control. So a goal within that might be like, thinking of the picture book example still, a goal might be make a series of 5 picture book illustrations for my picture book portfolio or whatever. So you can see the difference between those two. Like getting a book deal is something that's really big and lofty and will involve more people than just you. Whereas, making these 5 illustrations for your portfolio, yes, that is something that you can control whether you do it or not. So when I'm doing this process, I like to first just brainstorm, just get it all out there. You can do that either in a list or a word cloud or association cloud or whatever. Just try to do a mind dump onto the page. And even though I specifically have highlighted what I think of as a goal here, and a goal is something that's specific, concrete, in your control. You can go ahead and just do this process as freely as possible. So try not to be as you're writing something down, try not to critique it or say is that really a goal? At first, just write it all down. And then once you've got it on the piece of paper, then you can kind of weed through and say, no, this is more of an aspiration. Maybe I'll put that in another list over here. Aspirations aren't bad. They're just not particularly helpful in overcoming self-doubt. We need something that's going to bring us really in touch with our actions and what we're doing next to do that. So sort through, figure out which ones are aspirations, which ones are goals, and then you can further call that list by figuring out, okay, like which of these goals are super concrete, which of these goals are, something that I could focus on next. And your goal is ultimately to try to decide on one goal to focus on first. And there are lots of different ways to choose the best one to focus on first. Again, that non-toxic productivity series that I mentioned, that has kind of my whole process for choosing your goals, for identifying and selecting a goal. So I won't go into too much detail, but you could choose, based off of like which one seems the most fun, which one makes you the most excited, which one, do you have all of the resources to start on right away. So you can kind of, in this process, you can almost think through some of the ways that you might be self-sabotaging because of your self-doubt. Like a really common thing that people will do is come up with this great, concrete, specific goal, but they don't have all the stuff they need to get started on it right now, or they can't really do it like at the phase of life that they're in right now. So there's all these different criteria that you can use. But try to identify a goal that's going to essentially meet all of them, that's going to make you excited, that you have everything that you need to start on, that's super specific, and then write that one down. Now, a little note here for people who are maybe really, really struggling with self-doubt like I was. And what I mean by really, really struggling is, maybe you have had a series of attempts of like starting and stopping, and you're really having a hard time getting anything off the ground, having a very hard time completing any projects, any self-initiated projects. If you are in that boat, if you've done that serially for years, like I did, then I would challenge you to take that goal that you've identified and break it up into even smaller parts. So you are looking to make this as easy as possible. And it may take you a few sessions of doing this. So write it down one day and then come back to it another day and look at it and say, like, is this really simple enough? Is this really straightforward enough? Is this easy enough? Is this a low enough bar? And this is, again, if you are really just chronically struggling with self-doubt, like I said, it was a pretty big thing for me. So I was somebody who definitely needed to do this process. So, taking that goal and making it smaller, making it easier. My hope for you, what I would suggest is that when you should make that goal so easy that when you look at it, you think, ugh, that's too simple. Anybody could do that. That's too easy. That you almost feel a little bit like, not disgusted by it, but like just like you're rolling your eyes, like, oh, come on, like that's too easy. That's what you need at this point. If you have been in just chronic cycles of starting and stopping and not being able to complete things, you need to have some easy wins. You need a number of easy wins, actually. So setting yourself up to complete these things, what you're doing is you're building a body of evidence for yourself so that when you're really in the grip of self-doubt, you're going to be able to look back and say, oh yeah, I did that. I did that. I did that. I did that. And you're wanting to make that case so strong that you are able to keep pushing through any level of self-doubt because even if you feel the self-doubt, that the evidence is right in front of you, that you have already done this before and that you can do it again. So make that goal super, super easy. Again, if you are really struggling, and if you're, maybe this is a little bit of a problem for you, it kind of gets in your way, but you've already, done some things, you've completed some things, and you know that you can just make it a regular goal. It doesn't necessarily have to be that super bite-size, easy beginner goal that I'm talking about. All right, now that we have our achievable goal identified, whatever that is for you, we're going to go ahead and move on to step 4 in dealing with self-doubt and working with self-doubt, and that is to act. Now, this 4th step, taking action, is where you are really and truly going to take the power back from your self-doubt. I've said this multiple times throughout this video already, but let's just acknowledge again that while we cannot control our feelings, we can't suddenly make ourselves feel super confident, really certain. We can't just eliminate that feeling of self-doubt. That is out of our control to a certain extent, but we do have a choice. We do have control every time we decide to act or decide not to act. And while it may not feel like it in the moment, if you're anything like me, when you are really in the grip of self-doubt and you're not acting, you're not doing something, it can feel like that's just something that's happening to you, that's, you don't have any control over it. But deciding not to act is also a decision. It's also a choice. Now, I want to step really tentatively and carefully here. And what I'm not saying by that is that you shouldn't just be able to decide on any goal willy-nilly and magically accomplish it, regardless of where you're at personally, what your life circumstances are, whatever challenges are surrounding you. That would be like, somebody who is afraid of swimming suddenly deciding, you know what, I'm going to swim the English Channel to really tackle my fear head on, and not doing any practice or preparation, just, saying I've been afraid of swimming my entire life, and just diving into the English Channel and going. That would be, really silly. That would be doomed to failure from the start. That's never going to accomplish anything. So we all have our own unique life circumstances, challenges, things that are life circumstances that are out of our control. It's not just our feelings that we can't fully control. We can't fully control our life circumstances. There are people who have maybe a little bit of an easier start, an easier foundation, and people who have a harder start and a harder foundation. And that is a reality. I'm not advocating, the idea that you should just be able to believe that you can do it. And if you believe that you can do it, then you'll get it done. That's not what I'm saying at all. I do not think that's true. But what you need to do instead is to work through this process that we've talked about, identify those realistic goals that you can start on, and make the choice to act from there. Okay, so what that looks like in real time. Once you have that goal identified, and we talked about, if you're a serial project not finisher, if you're an incompletist like me, like I used to be, then your goal is going to be so easy. It's going to be so easy that it makes you kind of feel a little bit embarrassed, or maybe even roll your eyes at it a little bit. And if you are somebody who's just kind of in a particular struggle with self-doubt at the moment, but it's not like absolutely paralyzing you and making you unable to take steps towards your goals, then you have just like a regular, nice, non-specific goal. But regardless, you've got your goal in front of you. And what you need to do is, not just write that goal on a piece of paper. A lot of people will get to that point, just write it down. And this is what I used to do as well. Just write it down and then have a hard time actually taking action on it, because what you haven't done at that point is break it down into steps. So thinking back to the goal, the analogy earlier of like the picture book illustration. So let's say you've decided to do 5 sample picture book illustrations for your portfolio. So don't just write 5 picture book illustrations in your to-do list or whatever. You can put that there, but then underneath it, you're going to need a whole bunch of other things. Get super nitty-gritty, get down into, think through like every step of your process, really detailed, all of the things that are going to need to happen to make those 5 illustrations and get them onto your portfolio. So I just kind of brainstormed my process here. So some of that would be like concepts, thumbnails, revisions, research on the actual reference material. So for me, that might be something like concepts, research, thumbnails, revisions on the thumbnails, then, a process of gathering reference images and then organizing the reference images so that I know what I have, especially if I'm doing multiple different pieces at once. Then I'm going to finalize the concept, turn it into a sketch, potentially maybe revise the sketch as well, transfer it onto paper. If you're working traditionally, of course, like I am, then it would involve at least a couple of layers of watercolor, a couple of layers of colored pencil, and I'd have each of these things be a separate bullet point. Then there'd be, kind of finalizing it, finishing the piece off, scanning it in, editing it, so removing the background and essentially preparing it to be used in a portfolio. Then, exporting it for my portfolio, exporting it for social media, actually getting it uploaded onto my portfolio, getting it used and shared on social media. So you can see there are so many little steps embedded within that one goal. And part of why I think that this process is so important is I have is that in my experience, when I have been really in the grip of self-doubt and I'm having a very hard time taking action, something that I will use as something that will get in the way for me is if I don't quite know exactly what to do next. I might have like a great specific goal, but I don't exactly know what the next step is. So taking that extra time to think through all of the steps so that your choice is very clear. Your choice is between, taking this step despite how you feel, even when you're, really in the throes of self-doubt and it feels really overwhelming. You know exactly what needs to happen. You know the step that you need to take, and you can decide really clearly whether or not you're going to do it. So then you are actually going to do it. You're going to make that choice. You're going to take that first step, even if it feels like an insignificant step, even if your goal, like we talked about, it feels laughable to you, and the steps within it feel, silly to even be counting them as steps. Even if your self-doubt suddenly, roars back even louder and is more overpowering, you're going to feel those feelings, accept how you feel, accept that you feel them, and decide to act anyway, not waiting for the feelings to go away. Now, a little bit more of a specific note here on positive thinking. I think I referenced this earlier in the video, but it's a very popular topic. It's something, we probably all have heard about, or at least have some kind of popular understanding of. Positive thinking, positive self-talk, mantras, all of that. And if those work for you, if in the past you've done them and they've helped you get through a period of self-doubt, a period when you're really struggling and stuck in self-doubt, if the positive self-talk helps you to act, if it helps to get you past that, then that's great. And you should use that tool. But if they haven't helped you in the past, if the positive self-talk has just left you stuck and you have stayed stuck and you haven't gotten moving, you probably do need to try something different. So I've mentioned before that my brother, who is a therapist, he specializes in OCD and anxiety. I've talked about him before on this channel, and he and I, we talk about feelings all the time. It's one of our favorite topics. And something that he has shared with me is that in practice with people who are dealing with not just self-doubt and anxiety, but like actual, OCD and clinical symptoms that are, truly debilitating in their lives, that trying to use positive self-talk for them actually has the exact opposite effect. And, if they are feeling these feelings of anxiety or self-doubt or, whatever, and they try to say like, I'm strong, or I'm outgoing, or I can do this, whatever it is, those feelings just make the bad feelings talk even louder. They just turn the volume up on the bad feelings. So that's why I say, if you have tried self-doubt and you have found that if you tried self-doubt, if you've tried positive self-talk to deal with your self-doubt and it hasn't helped you, if it's just left you, continuing to struggle and feeling these feelings even with the volume turned up, then you can try doing something a little bit different. And this could happen just in the moment when you're deciding to act, while you're acting, while you're taking those steps. So, and if you feel the feelings come up, instead of saying like, I'm strong, or I've got this, or I don't even know what. You can tell that they don't work for me because I don't really have any that are immediately coming to mind. But try first to acknowledge your feelings. So just imagine, like, if you are, imagine yourself, your inner child, the little you that's in there, that's kind of having like a little bit of a freak out, a little bit of a tantrum. If you try to just push that away and say, you're not feeling that way, you're not feeling that way, we're feeling something else, that's not going to do anything for you. So first say, yes, I feel afraid, I feel vulnerable, I feel anxious, whatever it is, whatever that feeling that comes up for you, and try to name it, be specific, acknowledge that feeling is there. And then when you're getting ready to kind of shift gears and make the step towards taking action with that feeling right alongside you, ask yourself, is this step that I'm about to take, is this important to me? And that's why it's so crucial to have your clear goal identified and also your next step. Because otherwise you're not going to be able to ask yourself, you're not going to be able to say, does this matter? Do I actually care if I do this or not? Ask yourself, what will happen if you don't do that? What's going to happen if you don't take that first step? What's going to happen if you don't achieve that goal. If you don't reach that goal, finish that project, whatever it is. You can also try asking yourself, like, depending on what your self-doubt is clustered around, the focus of it, you try asking yourself, what's going to be the worst case scenario if I do this? And, journal that, write it down, let it play out, catastrophize to your heart's extent. Actually, really walk that through to the end, because, if you are like many of us, if you're like me and you get caught in that loop of like feeling it and trying desperately not to go down that path, that doesn't work. Let it get all of its energy out. Get that out on a piece of paper in front of you. Stop trying to push it away. Acknowledge that it's there. Do the worst case scenario. And then, ultimately what you have to ask yourself is, am I willing to do this even if this feeling doesn't stop? Even if this feeling is beside me the whole way, am I willing to do this? Now, this is not an easy fix at all. I think I've been pretty clear about that from the beginning. This isn't just a quick flip the switch. But if you can walk through this process, these 4 steps, and maybe even to the specific level of this kind of internal dialogue that we've just unpacked here, if you can take those steps and then take action based off of what really matters to you, what your deep, deep values are, where you want to go in your life, then you will ultimately rob that self-doubt of its power. Even if it's right there alongside you the whole time, even if the volume is really loud, by taking action, you won't stop feeling that self-doubt. In fact, you never will stop feeling this self-doubt. Even if you get really good at doing that, you can do that over and over and over again. You can do this process over and over again. You can achieve not just that first goal that you identified, but dozens of others. You can make it further than you ever thought you would make it in terms of an art career. You can do things that you never would have imagined were possible at the beginning. And the self-doubt will still be there. And I hope that that's not disappointing or frustrating to hear. And maybe I'll always leave this possibility. Maybe it will be different for you. But for me, it's still there. And what I have learned is that taking action, going in the direction that my values lead me and where I ultimately want to be in life, makes it so that the self-doubt doesn't have any sting. It doesn't, well, no, I shouldn't say that. It still stings, but it doesn't have any real teeth. It can't hurt me. And in time, even though doing these things over and over again and with practice is not going to take away the self-doubt, it will, like we talked about, you'll be building up that ledger of things. You'll be building up the evidence, the case that you're going to make to yourself that you do have value, that you are strong, that you can do it. And that's much more powerful than just a, kind of a hollow, positive self-talk that isn't based in reality. Now, I am not saying that this is an easy fix by any means. I think I've been clear about that from the beginning. This is not going to be a process that will eliminate self-doubt from your life. And in fact, you could do this process over and over again. You could check off every step that you identify within that first goal. You can achieve that first goal. You can achieve 100 other goals after that. You can do things that you do not even believe are possible from where you're sitting right now. You can get further in your career than you ever imagined. And you will still probably struggle with self-doubt. It will still be, or at least it will still be a presence in your life. I still struggle with self-doubt. It's still there. Every time I take action, and especially if I do something that is new or unfamiliar or makes me feel, a little bit fearful or uncomfortable in some way, then the self-doubt is very loud. So you can do all of this and it's still going to be there. But what walking through this process and accepting the self-doubt, acknowledging it, exploring it, accepting it, deciding on a goal, and taking actions based off of your values, based off of what's important to you in life, based off of where you ultimately want to go as a creative person, as an artist, is really going to ameliorate the worst effects of that self-doubt. It's really going to take the teeth away from the self-doubt. It's going to make it so that it truly can't hurt you. And in time, doing these practices over and over again, while they don't take the self-doubt away, what they do is they give you other resources. They give you a ledger, a case that you can make to yourself for when you're in that place, when you're in the low place, when you're really staring into the void and feeling that self-doubt at its strongest. You will have something much more powerful than, a positive phrase. You'll have evidence of what you have been able to accomplish in the past. You'll have evidence of how resilient you are, of how strong you are, of what you have, of what you've actually been able to do, despite your circumstances, with the skills and the talent and what you have, your unique person, what you've actually been able to do, where you've actually been able to go. And having that evidence, it doesn't take the self-doubt away, but it makes it increasingly easier for you to act even when you're feeling it really strongly. So with time, with practice, with doing all these things and building up that body of evidence, that body of proof for yourself, your internal dialogue will start to shift, and it will become something more like, I'm not sure. I feel uncertain. I feel vulnerable. This is really uncomfortable and I don't like it. And I know that I can take this one next step. I know that I have done all of these other things before. I know that I have enough resilience to take whatever is coming. And I know that I can do this one next thing. I have evidence. I can see all these times that I have done it before. This is important to me. And I know what I need to do next. And I know that I'll get it done. And once you get to that place, self-doubt can really kind of hit you with its best, and you'll still keep going. And that's my hope for you, Jay. And that is my hope for each one of you watching this who is struggling with self-doubt, and especially if you are struggling with it to the point where it's stopping you from doing what you want to do creatively, then please, I hope you will give these a try and see how much resilience you actually have, how much determination you actually have, and that you are strong enough to do this even while you feel the uncomfortable feelings. So that is it for this video. I really, truly hope that you have found something helpful here, something valuable here. Let me know if you liked this video, if this was helpful for you, and why don't you leave a blue heart in the comments if you want Jay to know that they're not alone, and that you've struggled that struggle too. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your comments on the last video. Thank you to my patrons for supporting this channel and making it possible. Thank you to Meg for editing. All right, I think that's all the thank yous. Thank you again to you for watching. Hit the like and subscribe if you do want to see more videos like this, and I will talk to you all again soon. Bye.